Prior to the announcement that Grounded was being fully released in September, I was working on a video about where is Dr. Wendall Tully. After seeing the trailer for the 1.0 release, I think we may have an answer to that question, and in this video I'm going to discuss my theory about where Dr. Wendall Tully is and what role he will play in the ending to our story. Before we begin, I want to thank King Bling Blog Gaming, Lyndon Dade, Matthew Campbell, Stephen Van, and all my other channel members for helping make videos like this possible. You can become a member today and have your name included in future videos by clicking the join button below or the link in the description. Thanks again to all my channel members. Let's get started. I think the best place to start this conversation is by looking at a short scene from the 1.0 Grounded full release trailer. That's this scene that you can see here, which you'll be seeing real quick, and this is only like a 1 or 2 second scene. I have it playing in super slow-mo so I can stop it at the appropriate frames. Basically, this looks like the teens are walking in an underground area. There is copper piping here up at the top, as well as what looks like maybe some PVC piping over here. So this is either going to be underneath of the shed or perhaps underneath the house. We've had no indication that we're going underneath the house, so I'm going to lean towards this possibly being underneath the shed, although it could be either one. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this play forward just for a second here, and then we're going to pause it once we get to the scene. So up here in the top left corner, you're going to see, or on the left side of the screen, we're going to see what looks like to be some type of monster, and then we'll pause it right here. And basically what this looks like is some type of monster that has been mutated perhaps by muscle sprouts. That's what I kind of get out of this, although it could be berries. It's like a pinkish purple color here. It does look like there's some type of like tighty whities here, which will be fitting underwear for someone from the 80s. And what this may be is perhaps this is Dr. Tully. So that's where I want to start this conversation here is, do we think this is Dr. Wendall Tully? When I was looking at the yard before this trailer came out, I was thinking of all the places that Dr. Tully could be located, because I think it's pretty obvious that Dr. Tully is going to have to somehow be involved in the end of the story. If you've read through or listened to the Burgle stuff that's been added after the Bug Strike Back update, there's some information there about the embiggening cocktail, and Burgle couldn't remember the last part of the ingredient, which leads it to believe that either Dr. Tully is still alive and is going to give it to us, or perhaps we're going to have to find some type of notes from Dr. Tully. So I'm leaning towards this possibly being one of two people. This is either going to be Dr. Tully, which would possibly make the most sense because it'd be more likely that he'd be testing the muscle sprouts out on himself, or it could also be his son, because he does have a son and daughter, which are mentioned, I believe, in either the audio logs or some of the notes. I believe the son's name is Thor. I'm not sure if that's his real name or if that's just a nickname. And if Thor is a mythological character, obviously, who is super buff, so perhaps that would make sense that this could be his son. Perhaps maybe he was doing experiments on himself, and maybe he experimented on his son and things went horribly wrong. I'm leaning towards this possibly being Dr. Tully, and I think the way this might play out is, if this is in fact Dr. Tully, I don't know if he's going to be the final boss, because it wouldn't make sense for us to have to kill him. If we kill him, how are we going to get unshrunk? So perhaps we have to cure Dr. Tully, or maybe this is just not Dr. Tully. Maybe this is something that has Dr. Tully in prison somewhere, perhaps either in this area that we're seeing here or maybe somewhere else, and maybe we have to kill this guy to get the last access to the last lab or something like that. So this probably is the most likely location where Dr. Tully is going to be the undershed area, which is what this looks like to me. Although there is a root here, which is kind of interesting because I don't know if there's any roots actually in the undershed area. So perhaps this is going to be in the upper part of the yard. Maybe this is another area. Maybe this is just an underground tunnel where the sprinklers are running through, because there are sprinklers throughout the yard. So it might not be in the undershed area, although it would make the most sense because there's, like I said, all the PVC piping and stuff like that. And with a big open area like this, if that was underneath your backyard, having something like that, that would almost be like a sinkhole. So I'm thinking this is probably either underneath the shed or underneath the house, and that this might be the final location we have to go to before the story ends. Now, aside from this, one other thing I wanted to look at was at the very end of the video, which I'm going to skip ahead to, is another scene that many people pointed out. This is one of the most frequent comments because it's one thing I didn't catch when I first went through the trailer. So let's skip ahead to that. So I skipped ahead towards the end of the trailer, and what you're going to see here on the bottom left side of the screen is this thing, which kind of looks like, I mean, it pretty much looks exactly like the monstrous looking thing we saw in the previous part of the video. Now, another thing people pointed out is that this kind of looks like one of the monsters from the maze up on the picnic table. And while it could be that, because it does have little things here, like it almost looks like an ant that's just buffed up on steroids, I think it's more likely that instead of that being one of them, it's probably just gonna maybe just resemble him, and it's more likely than not either gonna be Dr. Tully or his son. So if let's assume this is Dr. Tully, where would it be on the map? And like I said, the most likely place is going to be the undershed area, but I do want to hop on over to the game real quick and take a look at parts of the map that we have not accessed yet that would possibly make sense for Dr. Tully to be located. If this is maybe not him, and maybe this thing is just the boss that we have to defeat in order to get to Dr. Tully. So the first place I want to look at is going to be a place that's been in the game. This door has been in the game since as long as I can remember, maybe since the beginning of the game. And it's a place that's never been unlocked and we have never had access to it. This is over by the pond area over here on the right side of the map. So we're over here. This is where where we respawn, and there's a couple of bombardier beetles down here, one of which has managed to get himself stuck in a rock. So this door's been here for as long as I can remember. Like I said, it might have been there since the beginning, since the game was actually launched. And at one point you could glitch through the wall, and behind it was a berry monster. So if perhaps the monster that we saw in the video before has something to do with the berry monsters and it's not muscle sprouts, perhaps Dr. Tully could be in here. This might be the final lab that maybe we have to get to save him. Maybe we have to kill the berry monster up underneath the shed, or the whatever that monster is up underneath the shed, and we have to get up here. It could also be that the area we saw might be up here as well, because like I said, we're not 100% sure it's under the shed. It's most likely under the shed, but you never know because there are sprinklers throughout the yard, and it could be pretty much anywhere in the yard. So this is one place it could be, because this is one place Dr. Tully could be located, because this is the only lab door that we have not been able to get access to outside the ones that are in the pond. There is a small lab that's over underneath the oak tree in the pond down here. That's too small to have Dr. Tully in it from what I believe. There is also one under the pagoda. I'm not going to go over there because there is an area over there where we haven't been able to get to. That doesn't look large enough either, although I guess it could be much larger than maybe meets the eye. But that's one that I think is more likely than not just going to maybe have some additional maybe notes or something in it, and we'll unlock that when we do the pond lab later on. I don't believe that's going to be the location of Dr. Tully, so perhaps this berry lab here will have something to do with it. Obviously, we're going to get in here at some point, or they would have removed it, and this could be the location of Dr. Tully. Now let's move on to other parts of the yard to see other locations that perhaps we could find Dr. Wendall Tully. The second area I want to take a look at is the upper pond area. This, of course, is behind the construction tape. There is an area over here, but honestly, there's not really much in here unless they sneak something in. There's just basically dirt and grass up here. So I don't expect anything to be added over there other than maybe a couple of bugs or something like that. But this pond area here, this upper pond, at one point during one of the public test servers, and it almost looks like there's a hole in it back there. At one point during one of the public test servers, this thing was completely drained out. There was no water in it, and there was a hole at the bottom of it, which looked like it was leading down to possibly some type of underwater lab. So perhaps the pagoda here connects up to here somehow. Maybe there's just some kind of giant subterranean lab that meets up here. So there's a possibility that Dr. Tully could be somewhere underneath of here. Maybe this is the final part of the map that we access. So maybe we work our way around the upper yard and finally make our way over here, and Dr. Tully somehow underneath the water in here, and that's how we find the last piece of the embiggening cocktail. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some other parts in the upper yard as to where Dr. Tully might be located before we wrap this video up. I made my way over to the upper right part of the backyard, which right here you can see just in the area that really doesn't have much done to it. So most of the terraforming was done over here. But as you can see, there's some broken PVC piping here, which does lead down into part of the yard that was finished. So like I said, because all this PVC piping is here, there is a possibility that the area that we saw in the trailer might not necessarily 100% be under the shed, although it most likely seems to be there. It could almost be anywhere in the yard because there are sprinklers throughout the yard. There obviously is PVC piping running from something. I don't know what this is running from. It's running, it looks like straight in this direction up to something like here. So perhaps there's going to be some type of, and there's another piece of it right there. So maybe there's going to be some other type of structure that's up here in the top right corner. Although it does look like there's probably going to be a hedge up here. There could also be some type of maybe like workbench or something, some type of small, I don't know, some small structure, maybe a little storage bin or something that's up here. And maybe that's the controls for the sprinklers. And maybe that's the area where Dr. Tully's going to be located. Now, if the upper area here is going to have the other hedge, which seems most likely because it's appeared in a couple of trailers and has been shown in the dev worlds before, I think that's obviously going to be the location of the mantis that's been shown. So the mantis is almost surely going to be somewhere up in this top right corner. I mean, where else would it be? And also possibly the Black Widow. The Black Widow in the trailer did look like it might have been under the other hedge over there. But if this hedge is similar and has a lab in it, if there is a hedge up here, then there's a possibility we'll have both the Black Widow and the Mantis up here. The alternative would be the Black Widow being over there. To be completely honest, I would see the Black Widow being more towards the end game. It'd be kind of, I think it'll be kind of out of place for them just to swap out the Orb Reavers over there and throw in Black Widows, although that's possibly the case. So if this area is guarded by, at the very least, a Mantis boss, perhaps the Mantis is going to be where the location of Dr. Tully is. I don't think that's likely, though. The only reason for that is going to be because in the trailer, and this might just not even, maybe it just doesn't even matter, when the teens were going through the underground area where the monster was shown, one of them did have on the full Mantis set, which would lead me to believe. Now, of course, in other parts of the trailer, they were going to fight the Mantis using just off the wall stuff like red ant armor, and one was wearing a marksman's cap using a melee weapon, so that didn't necessarily make sense. But having the full Mantis set when going in that subterranean area leads me to believe the Mantis is not going to be the final boss, and perhaps that monster that we saw in the video is going to be the final boss, and whether or not that's Dr. Tully, we'll have to wait and see. But I think there's a possibility that, there is a small possibility, although it unlikely, that Dr. Tully could be somewhere up in this upper right corner here, where there's going to be a new hedge, and most likely have some type of lab up there. If they have that giant hedge and don't really have a lab in it, I think that would be, I think that the hedge would have to have something more than that. Now, this other part of the yard here, I don't see anything down here. There are some tunnels and stuff like that, but I think in one of the trailers they actually showed, or actually in the full release trailer, it looked like a trash bag up here, as well as possibly a coffee maker. So there's a possibility that Dr. Tully, maybe we have to beat the final boss. Maybe Dr. Tully's not the final boss, and whatever that monster was, we beat him and then have to rescue Dr. Tully somewhere up here in the upper yard. Obviously, there's room for changes up here. There is some terraforming, but I'm sure they're going to do some more work. I'm sure there's been lots more done and we haven't seen it yet. So I think right now, if I was to guess, that my best guess is that the monster we saw in the end of the trailer, during the trailer for the 1.0 release for Grounded, is in fact Dr. Tully, and he's somehow been transformed. I think there's a smaller chance that it's his son, or perhaps someone else that was transformed, maybe a friend, although there's the only other character that's been, as far as I know, the only other male character that has been mentioned outside of Dr. Tully was his son, although we don't really know much about him, or at least I don't. I guess I'll have to go back and read all of the notes and listen to the audio files again. I don't remember hearing much about him other than the fact that he was just mentioned. But I think in all likelihood that monster was shown was Dr. Tully, and somehow he's accidentally transformed himself, either through the process with the berry monster that we know of, or perhaps through muscle sprouts, or both, and he's turned himself into that, whatever that is. And I believe that more likely than not, I think we're going to have to either cure him. I don't think we're going to have to kill him, because I feel like I said, if we kill him, how will we get the final recipe? How will we get the final piece of the recipe to unshrink ourselves? Unless, of course, he's guarding it and we do have to do that. I think the most likely scenario is that monster is Dr. Tully. We have to somehow figure out how to cure him. Maybe he's hiding and he doesn't actually want to fight us. Maybe he's not actually dangerous. Maybe he's just hiding. We have to somehow figure out how to fix him so that he can then unshrink us and finish the story. I think it's less likely that he is the actual final boss and that we do have to end up killing him in order to unshrink ourselves. But anyway, those are my ideas. Like I said, I was going to record this video last week, and I decided to put it off just for a little bit because I wanted to see what happened during the past weekend. And fortunately, we got that 1.0 release trailer, which kind of answers some of the questions. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think Dr. Tully is going to be the final boss, or do you think he is going to actually, we're going to have to somehow cure him of whatever's happened to him in order to finish the story? Do you think he's going to be in the undershed area? Do you think he's going to be under the house? Because as far as I know, the deck up there does still have under construction tape. So there's a possibility we're going to go under the deck, or maybe we're going to go on the deck at some point. Do you think he's somewhere else in the yard? One of the other labs that we haven't been able to get into, maybe one of the underwater labs, or perhaps that berry lab over there. Like I said, we haven't done anything in there yet. Or do you think he's maybe up here where the mantis is most likely going to be? Let me know in the comments down below what your theories are. I'd love to hear them. I know many of you have had some great ideas on how the story's going to end, and I'd love to hear those. Thank you for watching. Make sure to click the like button on your way out and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.